A grape.
Great, yeah.
Maybe two.
I gotta go to the stores you go to.
All right. Inner will and outer will. What you really want and what's a forced desire. What you really want produces something that you don't really want in order to get what you really want. So a lot of people go to work. They don't really want to go to work, but they want to be able to take care of their family. Many people do. I strongly suggest take a bookkeeping of a day of your life and see how many things you do that you only do it for the end that it gets you to, but not for the value in and of itself, as an end in itself. That will say a lot about values you have in life. And are you living with your values or not? Because if you're doing many things throughout the day that are an end in themselves, like now, learning Tanya as an end in itself, and all the mitzvahs that we do, then not only is it fulfilling, but then you're truly living with your values. Now, of course, we need to eat and drink, right? We need to do other things. We need to do, clean up the house. The real trick will be is that those things could even also be an end in themselves. Eating and drinking, not for the, just merely the pleasure, but the eating and drinking that is part of divine service. Cleaning up the house, part of divine service. It's how I serve God. Wow. So the truth is, we could fill up most of our day, it's possible, with things that are an end in themselves. But that's a lot of avodah. That's a lot of work, inside work on ourselves, to be able to come to such a level. Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zvicha Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We are continuing in chapter 23, understanding the inner will of God. The inner will of God is expressed in the fact that God truly wants the mitzvah. The metaphor for mitzvahs are the organs of the individual. They're called the organs of the king in the Zohar. Meaning, just as organs are a part of you, right? So likewise, the mitzvahs are a part of God. And therefore, it becomes an inner desire. You want your organs to be healthy. How come? Just because it's you, right? It's you. Well, that's an inner desire. So God's inner desire is for the mitzvah. What's his outer desire? His outer desire is that there is a world full of animals, vegetation, and inanimate objects. All those things are an external expression of his will, which means it's not really what he wants. But why does he have it then, if it's not what he really wants? First of all, he forces his own will, so to speak, figuratively speaking, right? It's not something external that's forcing him to create the animal, the vegetation, inanimate. It's his choice, but it's an external expression. It's not really what he wants. God is not really a tree hugger, and he's not really, the animals are not an end in themselves. Parenthetically, I just want to say over here, as a result, that's why animals could be used to eat, if they're kosher, to eat from them, because they're a means to an end. Human being, on the other hand, we don't slaughter to, because they're an end in themselves, created in the image of God. But here we're speaking about Eivarei de Malka, the organs of the king, right? That the mitzvahs are the organs of the king, and therefore they are one with God. And now the question is, let's take this metaphor, and it's a very short class that I've already made longer, just to give us the background that we had previously. Let's understand the concept of organs and how they are bound up to the individual. And therefore, how the mitzvahs are bound up in one with God, and they are the inner desire of what God wants. But I want to raise my hand. What kind of effort is there involved? Is there a process that goes through this that my hand is raised? No. Immediately. The desire is there. Immediately, without any hesitation. There isn't a process that it goes through. I mean, of course, there's the ligaments and the bones and everything, and the muscles and everything that have to, but it's done automatically, right? It's done automatically. There's no talk back even, right? No instructions that are given, no command that's given. So just like in the human body, the organ is completely united with the will. It's surrendered to the will of the person, right? That you will it, so acts your organ. So likewise, the life force that's animating the mitzvah, because God is animating everything. God is the source of all life. So the life force that's animating the mitzvah, which is the will of God, the inner will of God, we call the organs of the king, is so bound up with God that automatically it becomes the vehicle for life-giving force. It's clothed within it the divine will, the divine vitality that gives life. And that's the end. It's a very short, and we're in the middle of a thought to continue the thought tomorrow. But what this means is, when we're truly aligned with the organs of the body, like God forbid, if you have a problem with you want to raise your hand and you can't do that, of course that's a major problem that a person has, right? Means when we're aligned with our bodies, so then our body acts in accordance to what our desire is of ours to do with our body. So same thing is, when we're aligned with the divine will of God, then we're getting vitality directly from the inner will of God, as opposed to the rest of creation. The rest of creation is not aligned with the inner will of God. It comes from klipa, siter acher, the other side. Now, it's not a judgment call. It's not it's not their fault. But the very fact is, they are not aligned because they're only the means to an end. They're not like the organs of the king because they are not the mitzvah. Now, if the mitzvah happens to be done through a vegetable, like you're taking the palm tree the palm branch of a palm tree, right, on Sukkot, and you're making a blessing on Natilas Lulav and Esrog and so on, then yes, it becomes the vehicle, but not because it's from a tree. It's because God desires that it is a vehicle for the mitzvah that is expression of his inner will. And likewise, when you take an inanimate object like a coin, and now you give it to tzedakah, so it becomes now animated through the inner will of God, because it becomes a mitzvah object, and it's bound up. with God as a result. So in that respect, and we're going to learn, more on that as we move along, but this is the point in today's very short class. So when we surrender to the divine will, we're truly aligned with our true inner being and with the divine, with God himself.
Big responsibility.
It's a big responsibility, but it's an amazing empowerment. This is a big novel idea. Why is this novel? Because think about every other faith and religion. If you're going to believe in a certain, demagogue, right? That will buy you a ticket to heaven and you won't go to hell,
Okay.
right? If you believe and,
Blow yourself up.
blow yourself up and take some other innocent lives with you, it will be a means that you're going to get whatever,
Buddhism too.
right? And so on, right? Buddhism, yeah, you're going to get nirvana, right? It's all, in other words, in what you're doing, there's no value. It's what you get from what you're doing is the value. So I want to get somewhere, so I got to do something, right? That means in what I'm doing is not the desire, is not the inner will. The inner will is what it's going to get me. Here we're saying the opposite. In doing the mitzvah, that's an expression of the inner will of God. It's the organ of the king. And just as the organs of the human body are one with the body, so much so that there's no, I will to move my hand automatically moves, right? In a healthy environment, right? A healthy body, that is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one with God, therefore the mitzvah, and it's an expression of his inner will, what he really wants. And therefore, by doing the mitzvah, what I'm doing is fulfilling what he really wants. Not as a means to some end, not that it's going to get me to Gan Eden, not that it's going to get me brownie points, not to say it doesn't get you that, but that's not its true intended purpose. Is that through this, you are connected to the inner will of God, period. Not that it's going to buy you something. And again, not to say that it doesn't, but that's not its true understanding and definition. That is so novel, so refreshing, because that means that in the act of the mitzvah itself, there's a connection, a divine connection. Brett has a question. How do we know that if we're aligned with the inner will of God? You have to learn the code of Jewish law, so you know how to keep Shabbos properly, how to keep kosher properly, how to, pray properly, and so on and so forth. All the mitzvahs. That's how we know. And then you got to learn Tanya with that too. So you can get the inner dimension and truth. All right, folks. That was a very short class. More to come. Stay tuned. Rambam coming up. For those that weren't able to join yesterday for Torah studies, you can get it on Tanya Rabbi YouTube. You can get it there. Worthy of listening. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad, Zich and Kedeshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have an amazing, wonderful day. Rambam coming up. Thank you for joining.